The room was filled with laughter, applause, and the promise of new beginnings. Parents clutched their cameras, waiting for the moment their children would cross the stage. But in the middle of that joy, one father, decorated, disciplined, and proud, suddenly became the target of unwanted attention. Two guards closed in, their orders sharp, their eyes cold. They wanted him gone. The audience whispered, unsure of what was happening. He sat still, his pride turning into quiet humiliation. What they didn't know was that this man had worn the uniform of a Marine, fighting for the very freedoms being celebrated that day. And just as the tension reached its breaking point, 6 figures appeared from the back of the hall, men whose presence carried the weight of silence and authority. In that moment, the entire auditorium would be forced to confront one question: what happens when prejudice collides with honor? Marcus Williams had worn the uniform of the United States Marine Corps for over 20 years. His chest bore the silent testimony of sacrifice, medals for courage, commendations for leadership, and scars no one could ever see. But on this day, he wasn't a Marine in the eyes of the world. He was a father. His heart swelled as he sat among rows of proud parents, waiting for the moment his son, Jamal, would step across the stage to receive his diploma. This was not just a graduation, it was a victory. For Marcus, every deployment, every missed birthday, every sleepless night overseas had been for moments like this. The auditorium buzzed with laughter, chatter, and the snapping of pictures. Yet Marcus sat quietly, savoring it, soaking in the dream he had long carried, seeing his only son walk into a future brighter than the battles he had endured. But in the midst of his joy, eyes began to linger on him. Subtle at first, then sharper, colder. The color of his skin seemed to draw attention, though others in uniform and civilian clothes passed unnoticed. Still, Marcus dismissed it. This was his son's day. Surely nothing could tarnish that. But the storm was already building, and Marcus had no idea that before Jamal's name was called, his very presence would be challenged. As the ceremony neared its peak, Marcus shifted slightly, adjusting the jacket that carried the weight of his service. His heart pounded with excitement for Jamal's name to be announced, but his sense of pride was pierced by the presence of 2 uniformed security guards walking purposefully down the aisle. They weren't searching the crowd aimlessly. Their eyes locked on him with unnerving precision. Whispers spread through the audience as heads turned. A mother leaned to her husband and murmured, pointing discreetly at Marcus. Confusion rippled across his face. Why him? The guards stopped directly at his row, their stern expressions suggesting authority, but their words carried something far colder. Their gestures were firm, their message undeniable. He did not belong. The implication struck harder than any battlefield injury. In a place meant for celebration, the color of his skin and the assumptions tied to it marked him as suspicious, unwelcome. Parents nearby shuffled awkwardly, some avoiding eye contact, others watching curiously, as if waiting for him to comply. Marcus felt the shame burning through him, not because of anything he had done, but because of what others saw when they looked at him. Still, he refused to move. This was his son's day. Leaving was not an option. But the tension grew. The guards leaned closer, their presence threatening to overshadow Jamal's milestone. And in that charged silence, the stage was being set for an intervention no one could have predicted. Marcus sat motionless, shoulders squared, refusing to be intimidated. The uniform of the Marines had taught him resilience, dignity, and the weight of silence. He did not argue, nor raise his voice. He simply held his ground, meeting their eyes with quiet defiance. The guards, unsettled by his calm, pressed further, gesturing for him to rise. The crowd's whispers grew louder. To them, this was just a disturbance, a man causing trouble at a graduation. To Marcus, it was history repeating itself. He had fought wars overseas, only to return to a land where his skin still drew suspicion. Inside, a storm raged. Anger wrestled with sorrow. The humiliation of being treated as an outsider, even here in a hall of celebration, pressed heavily on him. Yet he thought only of Jamal. What would it mean if his son looked out into the audience, expecting to see his father, only to find an empty chair? That thought anchored him, rooted him deeper into his seat. The guards exchanged frustrated glances. Their authority, usually unquestioned, was meeting a wall of silent resistance. But before the confrontation could escalate further, a subtle shift swept across the auditorium. From the back, a group of men in crisp suits began moving forward, calm, deliberate, commanding without a word. And as the audience noticed who they were, the murmurs turned to silence. The 6 men walked with a presence that needed no introduction. Their posture, their eyes, the quiet weight of discipline in every step. It was unmistakable. Navy SEALs. They hadn't come for recognition. They hadn't come to disrupt. But as soon as they saw Marcus being cornered, they knew something had to be done. To the crowd, their sudden appearance seemed almost cinematic, as if a higher justice had been summoned into the room. The SEALs positioned themselves near Marcus, their alignment both protective and assertive. They didn't need to speak. The very sight of them was a statement. Veterans recognized veterans. Warriors recognized warriors. And in that silent recognition, Marcus was no longer just a man under suspicion. He was one of them. The guards hesitated, their confidence unraveling. Authority crumbled under the weight of true honor. The SEALs didn't push, didn't threaten. They simply stood there, their silence louder than any accusation. Parents, students, and faculty looked on, stunned. In a world quick to judge by appearances, here was a living testimony that respect is earned not by skin, but by sacrifice. Marcus, who moments ago had been singled out, now sat surrounded by symbols of unity and brotherhood. The stage was set, and the atmosphere had shifted. No longer was Marcus the target of whispers. Now the question in every heart was, how had they not seen who he really was? With the SEALs standing firm, the guards faltered. Their rigid stance softened into unease. The authority they clung to now seemed fragile, exposed against the backdrop of unwavering solidarity. The audience, once a passive sea of curiosity, now leaned forward, their perception of the scene reshaping in real time. It wasn't just about Marcus anymore. It was about the broader truth suddenly revealed, that prejudice can blind us to the very heroes who walk among us. How many times had assumptions, born of skin color, overshadowed sacrifice and service? Marcus felt the shift too. He had endured so many moments where silence felt like defeat. But now, silence carried a different meaning. It was strength. It was dignity. And it was amplified by the 6 men beside him who stood not just for him, but for every unseen battle fought by those unfairly judged. As the announcer's voice returned to the microphone, calling the next graduate's name, the hall carried a different energy. The SEALs had not just silenced the room, they had redefined it. Marcus sat taller, his presence undeniable, not because of confrontation, but because truth had found its voice without a single word spoken. Finally, Jamal's name rang through the auditorium. Cheers erupted as he walked confidently across the stage, his gown flowing, his future waiting. He searched the crowd, eyes locking onto the place where his father sat, not alone, not diminished, but honored. The sight struck him deeply. For years he had watched his father carry burdens without complaint, shield his pain, and stand tall despite the world's weight. And now, in front of his entire class, the truth of who his father was shone unmistakably. Jamal raised his diploma high, not just for himself, but for the man who had fought battles seen and unseen. The crowd erupted, clapping louder, their earlier whispers drowned in applause. Some applauded for the graduate, others for the father, and many because they realized they had witnessed something far greater than a ceremony. This was not merely a son's victory, It was a father's vindication. It was a moment where history's scars met present courage, where silence spoke louder than accusation, and where unity crushed the sting of prejudice. As the ceremony concluded, the seals quietly slipped away, leaving behind a silence that was not awkward, but reverent. People lingered, reflecting on what they had just witnessed. Conversations began, soft and thoughtful, about the dangers of assumptions and the quiet strength of those who endure them. Marcus stood slowly, his heart heavy but full. He had not spoken a word, yet his presence, his refusal to be moved, his recognition by brothers in arms, had told a story the entire auditorium would never forget. Walking toward his son, he realized the day had become about far more than a diploma. It had become a lesson etched into every witness, that true honor is not dictated by the color of one's skin, but by the content of one's sacrifice. And as Jamal embraced his father, the cheers still echoing in the background, the question hung silently in the air. How many other heroes walk among us, unseen, until the moment truth finally demands to be recognized?